Welcome to the Business Spotlight series. I'm Christy Davis, certified executive and leadership coach here at Action Coach North Texas. I've got Carlos Barreros with us today. He is the founder and president of CJB and Associates. Carlos, thank you so much for agreeing to be on our Business Spotlight. We're happy to have you here.
My pleasure, Christy.
All right. Well, Carlos, let's go ahead and get started. If you would tell our audience a little bit more about your background and your business, that way they have a little understanding of where we're going.
Sure. Well, I've been around for a while, so I'll try to keep it short. I'm a chemical engineer by training, as I say, but in the food business by choice. So I actually started at Procter& Gamble, turned down their first offer because it was in soap. And when they asked me why, I said, well, I love Procter& Gamble, but I don't really like soap. They said, well, why don't you come work in the coffee business, which they owned at the time. I love the idea. I love coffee, and I love the idea of working on something that I enjoy. So that started my career in food and beverage, and but also wanted international exposure. So I asked for an international assignment after 2 years in the company, and they said, "Oh, you're too young. It's a mistake." Then they said, "But you'll probably get pissed off and quit if we don't offer it to you." So we ended up going to Europe, and that started my international career. So we went back and forth a few times and settled back in Ohio, but Procter& Gamble did not share my love of food as they started selling their food businesses, so I took an offer from PepsiCo Foods here in Dallas, and that's what brought me to Dallas. And in R&D, always loved research and development, and eventually ran R&D for global PepsiCo Foods. Basically, if they made it and you ate it, I had the R&D. But the travel was insane. So after 13 years and 6 million miles on American Airlines, I decided to cash in my options and started my consulting business, CJB and Associates. And it's been great. I've had a wide range of clients from pre-revenue startups to Walmart. So pretty much everything in between. Loved it. Things were going well. Campbell's Soup had been after me for some time, and I had actually turned them down once. But then Denise Morrison became the CEO, and we just clicked. And I said, listen, I really would like to work for you, Denise, but my wife has a practice in Dallas. She's a therapist, so I can't move. Plus, I got a good business here. You have to buy me out. Figured that would be the end of it. She called me the next day and said, okay. So I said, oh, okay. So be careful what you wish for. But no, it's great. I really enjoyed working with her, and I thought it'd be a couple years. Ended up being 5 years. Retired from there in 2018. Restarted my consulting business, and it's been going gangbusters. So that's my consulting business, and what we do, Christy, is I say chef to shelf because I'm an engineer. I have scientists and engineers in my network as well as marketing and packaging experts. So we literally can take you from creating an idea all the way to the shelf and even beyond. So I think that makes us unique as far as the R&D or food and beverage consulting space goes. But we didn't stop there. At Campbell Soup, I met a very talented vegan product developer. And I tried to convince Campbell's to launch their own line of plant-based products. I thought I had them convinced, but in the soup business, you lose a half a point share and all hell breaks loose. So they passed. But after I retired and my co-founder, George Voudatakis, the vegan chef, left, I said, George, your stuff is just too good. We've got to start our own line of food. And that was the birth of Plantasia Foods, which is a line of plant-based products, soy-free, gluten-free. And so I got to, I've advised many startups and entrepreneurs, but this is the first time I did my own company startup, not counting the consulting business. So it's a little bit different when you're actually having to write the checks. So that's a quick background.
Well, my goodness, what an illustrious career. You've experienced many different things, but the one thing that stood out, not many things stood out, but the first thing that stood out to me was as a young individual starting out, you made it a priority to work in a field or work within a system of what you loved instead of
Absolutely.
just taking a position.
Absolutely. I know it's trite and it's easy advice to give, when you have the choice. But I tell, people ask me for career advice. They say, what can I do to, the next set of stripes? I want to be whatever, director, VP. I said, well, that's great, but why don't you make sure you're doing something you enjoy and you'll probably have a better chance of getting those extra stripes. And like I said, I know not everybody has that luxury, but boy, if you do, and you probably have more latitude than you think. And when I talk to people, I think sometimes they think I've got to follow this order. And I said, well, that's fine, but things happen, so be prepared. And I don't know exactly what gave me I don't know, I'd say confidence, but maybe the arrogance to say to turn down Procter and Gamble offer and then come back with the coffee and also the international assignment. Both my wife and I have international experience. Neither of us were born in the U.S. And so we loved Cincinnati, but we didn't want to spend our entire life in Cincinnati. And so I said, well, it doesn't hurt to ask. And I guess that's the other thing I would advise people, young or old, is don't be afraid to ask for what you want. If they don't know and an opportunity comes up, they just may assume that you're not interested in an international assignment, as an example, or going to manufacturing or marketing or whatever it is that you're interested in doing. And there have been occasions, because I've done so many international assignments and moves, where I've talked to management and they're looking for a certain person, and we say, well, how about so and so, maybe Joe would be interested. Oh no, he would never move. I said, well, have you asked him? And many times when you ask, they'll say, sure, yeah, love to do that. And I guess the follow up to that is, why didn't he express the interest in the first place? Right?
We live in that world of unexpressed expectations, and then we end up with that disappointment. Or when we're dreaming, as you have come through, and we're talking of your roles now, you're a consultant, you've been in the corporate side in the research and development, and then you flipped and started your own company. And I think you said yourself, it's a little different when you're writing the checks. Tell us a
Absolutely.
little bit about that role and how you walked through it and made that decision.
Well, I think first of all, having already had my own consulting business helped because, it's easy to get spoiled in the corporate world, right? I mean, things are taken care of for you. You've got healthcare, you've got HR, you've got all these services. It can be pretty cushy, actually. I mean, when I hear people complain about, well, what they have to do, it's like, well, you may not be cut out for the entrepreneur life or starting your own business, but I think that helped the consulting business helped me understand that you're not going to get a regular paycheck. It's not that hard to get healthcare. It's even easier these days with healthcare.gov. And so a lot of the reasons people would give may not apply. The ones that do apply is, okay, if you're the primary income earner and you need that weekly or monthly paycheck, I get it. That's a big risk. So be prepared. And if you're fortunate enough to be prepared or accept that risk, and or hopefully maybe you've got a secondary earner that can manage the leaner times, that's important. And then don't expect people to don't you're not going to have a team of people doing stuff for you. You may have a team, but you have to get your hands dirty. And again, these days, even back in 2009 when I started my consulting company, it was so much easier than it would have been 20 years before that. I mean, for example, I trademarked my company. It takes 10 minutes on the web. You start up, you get a domain name, you get 10 of them for in 10 minutes. So those things are just so much easier than they used to be. So I think there's many fewer excuses for not starting your business these days than maybe back in the 80s and 90s, even the early 2000s.
I love the comment. There's little of excuses to make that next step, to go after that dream, to start your own company. I love that advice, and you're right. There is so much ease to the market, or less barriers to entry in starting your own business, whether it be, like you said, the internet and tools and consultants. Consultants are much more available and offering of their services to help entrepreneurial start and to understand the A to Z of what it looks like and how the work is going to look. I find still, though, sometimes in your consulting role, I still think sometimes people get a misnomer of that the consultant is going to do the work for you, as opposed to you, the individual that hires the consultant. I still think we see a little bit of that from time to time.
No, you're absolutely right, Chrissy. And what I tell my clients is, what do you bring to the party? Well, what I bring to the party is not me, but the people I bring in. And I'm pretty good at vetting experts because of my, experience and technical background, and whatnot. And frankly, they like it. A lot of the people I bring in are early retirees that have tremendous knowledge and capability. Makes me look good. They're happy, and the client's happy. So it's really a win-win. And I think the other thing too is I would say 95% of my consulting business is repeat. So, and word of mouth, which is a two-edged sword. On the one hand, it's nice that I have that. On the other hand, I know you're going to ask, what would I do over again? I might have been a little less complacent at the beginning because I was lucky. I mean, right off the bat, I got Starbucks, Pop Chips, Walmart as clients. I thought, well, this is it. I mean, this is easy, right? But I think if I had been just a little more, not aggressive, but maybe had a little bit more initiative on marketing and networking, it could have even been more sustainable and maybe to the point where, I could actually hire people, more people full time to help run it and be more of the elder statesman consultant.
Right. What when you say that, so what let's talk a little bit about the structure of your business, and you could choose. We can go either way, your consulting side or your plant-based.
Yeah. Well, we're still in the early days of the Plantasia Food, so I guess the advice that anybody will give an entrepreneur who's been through it is the same one I got and give is the top three reasons companies fail is cash, cash, cash. So that's reality. So two things: make sure you've got a line of sight to funding, and two, manage your cash very, very strictly. I mean, we are really, really lean on our payroll, and we offer equity instead. Of course, that's always, a choice. If you've got the money and you don't want to give up equity, that's fine. But equity is free when you're starting out. Cash is not, and it engenders loyalty. So, right, I mean, if people have a stake in the outcome of the business, it just naturally is human that they're going to be a little bit more willing to go above and beyond what they are expected to do to help the business succeed because there's payoff. And hopefully they enjoy it. I mean, I would not bring anybody into this that wasn't passionate about plant-based and believed in the good and future. And not to mention the number one way you can reduce greenhouse gas emissions tomorrow is to eat plants. So
I love that it's soy-free too.
soy-free and gluten-free. Well, that's another point. It's a crowded field. So I was not interested in going into something that we didn't have a reason to succeed. In fact, when we started this, we actually started thinking we would do a plant-based cheese. And we made some really good plant-based cheeses, but I don't know that they were really better than what was on the market. And they really weren't differentiated. So it's like, well, why do I want to be a Me Too? We've got to have a reason. And so we started with a burger. What makes us different, and still incredibly to this day, is we are the only soy-free, gluten-free, plant-based burger that is pre-cooked. So you can literally just pop it in the microwave, 60 seconds, and you've got a delicious plant-based burger. And I still can't believe we're the only ones who offer that. And we didn't do that for convenience. We did it because people don't know how to cook. One of our consumer insights was people don't know how to cook plant-based meat. But we can do it in a commercial setting in a way you can't do it at home. Whether it's partial steam, partial convection, temperature profile, and plus it didn't happen immediately. It took us like 50 different attempts. People talk about WD-40. We were at least at 50, and a happy consequence was the convenience. Which then our focus was retail, but over time, a lot of the interest has come from food service, which makes sense if you think about it.
Yeah,
So that's a
absolutely.
little bit about the plant-based world, and we've
Well,
expanded. We've got
definitely unique. You said it yourself, and you differentiated yourself in the marketplace. And I find that, our listeners out there that are contemplating opening a business or talking about a product, that definitely allows you to have that marketing share when you become that uniqueness, and you can identify and define your target for your product. And not obviously as the consulting side of your business, as well as Plantasia Foods, that definitely was probably pivotal for you to be able to do that.
well, absolutely. I mean, otherwise we'd have no reason for being. You know, I've spent almost all my career in R&D. I did have a stint in market research, but what I would tell, particularly like at Campbell's, when I would have to present my budget to the board of directors, I'd say, listen, the only value I can bring to the company is increasing shareholder wealth by adding layers of protection to things that matter to consumers. Because no matter how good it is, if it's not differentiated, then we'll never be able to command a premium. At the same time, if it's not good, nobody's going to buy it. Or you can buy trial, which I always tell people. You can't buy repeat, and maybe that's specific to the fast moving consumer goods business like food and beverage. And I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen in the plant based world. I have seen people get great funding with a product that I thought was really mediocre. I dare say bad. They can get shelf space because they have the money. You can buy shelf space, but you can't get people to buy it again. So, being a longtime food person and foodie, and same with my co-founder who's a chef, number one, it has to be delicious. And then everything else, yes, it has to be different. There has to be a reason for being. It has to be affordable, all those things. But at least in food and beverage, and I'm sure that would apply to any industry, right? I mean, if you're a software company, if it's not easy to use and solve the problem, it really doesn't matter how sexy the name is or how many um, you know social media clicks you can get.
That's very true. That I love the concept that I don't know that all businesses go into looking at it that way, though, that, your number one was delicious. And everything else came second to that, all still important, all had a priority. But if you didn't have the product to have the repeat client, then it was all for naught based on what you said. And that leads me to the next. Obviously, you have the uniqueness of your product. You shared that with us. But if when you're marketing your product, how do you compare to your consumers out there in your plant-based business?
Well, again, it is taste, and you have to go to the food shows. I don't know if you're familiar with Natural Foods Expo last in Anaheim. It was last month. 75,000 people came through, 3,300 exhibitors, and we gave out over 3,000 samples of our burgers, meatballs, crumbles, chicken nuggets, and chicken patties. And that gets you exposure. More importantly, we had 24 retailers come by expressing interest, and that gets you, ultimately on the shelf. Then comes frankly, that's hard, but the harder part then is building awareness, and that's what we're working through right now. Is great, good news. You're on the shelf. People love you, but if they don't know you're there, it doesn't matter. And that's buying trial. And unfortunately, in the retail world, that takes money. And so that's why a couple of things. One, you got to have the funding to do it. It's a little bit of a catch-22 because it's easier to get the funding once you're on the shelf, even though it's expensive to get on the shelf. So that's one part of it. But the other thing is we have a good group of advisors, all experienced, all of them entrepreneurs at one point or other in their own right. And they kept saying, you really ought to pivot to food service. And they have a good point because in food service, the trial is guaranteed. And then the operator, whether it's a cafeteria, a school, a camp, they will, if people are liking it, they will keep buying you. And there's a lot fewer layers involved. So, I think, again, it's not unique advice, but either you can say pivoting or be open to to opportunities when they come around, even if it wasn't your plan. I mean, like in R&D, it's, the typical research methodology is you have to have a hypothesis. So I would say in business, you have to have a strategy. But I would say, Christy, I've had many hypotheses in my R&D career that I was positive were correct. Most of them, maybe almost all of them, were not. But that's okay because then you say, okay, that didn't work, but now I have a better idea. And I think that's a little bit with the business. You have to be able to learn from failing. And I loved when I was at Campbell Soup, we had Plum Organics, and what I loved was every month the manager of the small group would have a meeting, and people would kind of boast about what they did wrong. The point being what they learned, and celebrated that. Easier said than done, by the way, because it takes I think a special manager, or CEO to really embrace that in real life. And that's and that's the other thing. People say, well, you don't be afraid to take risks. If I hear that in the corporate speak one more time, I'll go crazy, right? And yet you start talking to people who've taken risks and got punished for it, and that's the culture. So it's one thing culture is what actually behavior, not what people say. It's how people behave. And if you behave in a way that you get punished for taking risks, you're not going to take risks. And no matter how much you say, we need to change a culture of being risk taking, it doesn't happen until the behavior is there. So I think I would always say, whether you're an entrepreneur or in business, be really thoughtful about what you preach if you can't back it up.
Oh, good, very good advice. And that can go into all aspects, whether that be your people side, your team side of the business. It can be about your innovation. It can be about your marketing. Lots of different avenues to utilize that advice and be able to walk through it. Just a little bit, when taking a look back,
Mhm.
what has been your maybe your either your biggest success, or better yet, sometimes we were talking about being able to learn from our mistakes. I believe that there are no mistakes, because if we're not trying new things, we're not learning and growing. And I believe in that term, failing forward, because failure is not a destination; it's just an event along the journey. What's been your one of your biggest roadblocks that you've had to persevere through in your either the your Plantasia, or within your consulting business, or maybe even further back in your corporate America world?
Let's go further back because hopefully I've learned a few things along the way. But early on, there's a couple of things. First of all, networking is what everybody does these days. And it was equally important when I started my career. And if I did that over again, I would have been much more intentional about networking. And networking is not shilling yourself, it's just meeting people, taking the time, learning about them, and expanding your horizon. I managed to do that, but just because I've been around so long, you can't help but build a network when when you manage large R&D organizations and work for large companies. But I would have done it more, like I said, intentionally early if I did it over again. And I think that's, I just think about the opportunities that have happened to me, that have presented to me over the years, and it's all been because of, people I know or connections I made. And what I like to say is, I was just talking to a young man this weekend who was looking for career advice. And well, he's just so much more savvy. All these young people seem to be a lot more savvy than I was. Anyway, he was talking about this and that. And I said, serendipity happens, but you have to plan for it. And I think that's what I didn't fully appreciate when I started, partly because like I said, I had it pretty easy. I was a chemical engineer. They were in demand. There were plenty of offers. I didn't have to work as hard as people do these days. So like I said, that's good and bad. I mean, the good thing is it was easy. The bad thing is I probably would have learned more had it been harder. I would say the other thing I learned, being an R&D and engineer, I'm pretty left-brained. So to me, it was like, and that was kind of the culture at P&G, especially in R&D. Everything you needed was on a one-page memo. It was black and white. It was very logic driven. Now, another way to look at that, it was very apolitical. And I was proud of that. I would like, yeah, I'm not political. And what I learned was there is a place for politics. Now, being over politically is bad too, but there's a happy medium. And what does that mean? So, for example, if you're doing great work, but you're sort of too modest to talk about it, then it doesn't have impact. On the other hand, if you showboat it, that maybe is like too bragging. So, what I would say is showcase it. And that's kind of that middle ground. And that's something that took me a long time to really appreciate and practice. And you can change your not your personality, but your behavior. I mean, when we would do the personality profiles, that was always the typical, like most R&D people. Actually, we thought we were the majority. Turned out we were the minority. And what I found is, I'd be very much more the introvert. Now, when I do those profiles, I'm actually a little bit on the extrovert side, and it's whether or not it's my comfort zone, I can't say, but it's what I've had to learn to do to be more effective.
Yeah, I love that. Those learned behaviors. Personalities don't change, just like you said, but those learned behaviors, they evolve with us and they can sometimes add and benefit us. And like you said, sometimes they go against us when we, lack of better term you used, I love it when you're showboating. I love the showcase. Showcase your talent, showcase your expertise, showcase what you can provide and what you were capable of doing and have done. I love that comment because I think sometimes whether it's a Gen Z or a Gen Xer,
Mhm.
those individuals kind of were not taught to really promote themselves because everything was a win. They all won. They all were winners, and they've not learned how to really because they feel like I think so much of it that their work should speak for itself or their experience should speak for itself. And I think that they've done the everyone got a trophy sometimes has done a little bit of disservice to our individuals out there because of that component. And I love your advice about learning that happy medium, that showcasing.
Absolutely. And again, it depends on, you can generalize, and it's always dangerous, but if you're talking to a marketing group, they're probably okay on that field. Sales people for sure. Technical people tend, not always, but they do tend to be more on the left side of that political spectrum and can benefit from that advice to, yes, we're not never going to ask you to lie or fudge results. Absolutely not. But it's also okay to have incomplete data and say, here's what I think based on what we have. It's not complete. Yeah, I'd be more comfortable if I could have, 10 more years to do this, all the studies, but we don't have that luxury in business. Maybe in academia, although even that's changing. And so I think that's the other thing I would say. And I can't take credit for this quote. It came from Roger Rako, who's the CEO of PepsiCo when I joined. A point of view is worth 50 IQ points. And so when when the your manager, I mean, a classic example I like to use is there was a little bit of a crisis going on in the food world, and Campbell's was involved, and it had to do with labeling whether something was genetically modified or not. And the position of the industry was, we don't want to label, but we were getting a lot of heat. And my CEO, Denise Morrison, called me into her office. It was late at night. She was like, "Wow, what did I do wrong?" And she said, she was really upset too. And she said, "Listen, such and such senator, won't name names, talked to me and said, hey, you've got to change your position and allow labeling and start to promote it." And she said, "Carlos, what do you think?" Now, when I ask people that exact case, I say, "What would you say?" Too many of them say, "Well, let me think about it. Let me get more information. I'll come back to you." No. What you say is, "Here's what I think. Denise, I think it's a good idea." Then you can give all the caveats, and excuses you want, but you've got that very short window. You're an expert. She's turning to you. You got to give an answer, your point of view. Now, if it's something like, is this chemical safe or not, and you don't know, it's also okay to say, I don't know, because you don't have a valid point of view. But this is a little bit different. This is something you're supposed to know about.
What a great example and story and very good advice for our listeners out there, no matter what stage of their career, their business ownership, wherever they are in their journey themselves. Carlos, I think you've given us lots and lots of information. Our audience, make sure you save this one and go back. There's lots of nuggets that Carlos has provided that will help you along your business journey, or if you're just starting out, or if you're a seasoned professional and it's your fifth business that you've owned. Carlos, I like to end with some little bit of rapid fire questions for you, just a couple of them. So if you don't mind, we'll quickly go through that, and then we'll let you have the last word and close things up. So
Okay.
first question is, what's the one piece of advice you think that is critical for a business owner that you would give?
Be passionate about what you're doing because it's not always going to be profitable, at least not at the beginning, and you have a better chance of succeeding if you're passionate about it. And the good news is, even if you're not as successful, at least you'll like what you're doing and hopefully make a difference that matters to you.
I like that. What is one book that you have read over and over again because you find that every time you read it, it speaks to you differently, or you've learned so much from it?
There's a lot, but one that comes to mind, I was talking about, being apolitical versus being overly political. And there's a great book by Marty Seligman. I don't remember the exact title, but it's something basically about, political, being, in work, in business, being too political or apolitical. It's a short book, and Marty's a very high profile executive coach and talks a lot about that. And I found that, his advice to be spot on and with good examples.
Fantastic. And last question in the rapid fire is, if you could choose just one area of your business that you could immediately improve tomorrow, what would it be?
Hmm. I would say better marketing.
Better marketing.
So, for example, you're probably not familiar with IFT. It's a big international food technology expo in Chicago with like 20,000 people. I'm going to have a booth there for the first time. I should have had a booth there, in 2010, but better late than never.
No. You made that course correction, or you pivoted and you learned from not having that marketing in place. I love that, and that conversation. So one last thing, Carlos, how can a consumer find your product, or if somebody's looking for some consulting in the R&D food space or in your area, where can they find you? How can our audience get a hold of you?
Sure. Well, for my consulting site, it's cjbandassociates.com. And it's got some of our network there, some of our case studies. We've probably had over 50, clients. I haven't actually counted lately. Could be close to 100. And we do everything, as I say, literally from chef to shelf. So it can be as simple as 1 hour technical advice to going literally from ideation to the shelf, which we've done multiple times. So that's how you can find about a consulting. On our plant-based food, go to plantasiafoods.com, and you can buy online. And hopefully, Texas, we're still working on HEB, so hopefully you'll be able to find us soon in Texas. Right now, we're on both coasts and also in Gordon Food Service or Gordon stores. Which one? There's one in Houston. There's none in Dallas yet. So, and they're selling our chicken patties and our chicken nuggets.
Fantastic. So everyone, make sure you check it out. And if you wanted to find some plant-based food, certainly give Plantasia Food a try. Last question of the day, Carlos. What is most inspiring you today?
Wow. I just love seeing the people that I've worked with and helped develop blossom and, get roles. I mean, I'm so proud and get such pleasure out of people who worked for me early on and are now running their own business or head of innovation working in the C-suite. I just had lunch yesterday with a woman who happened to be in Dallas, and just pleasure to see her grow from a manager when I knew her at Campbell's to now vice president of Campbell Snacks. So those are the kinds of things I just love to, that inspires me.
Fantastic. That leadership, being able to influence and impact others. That's hopefully what we'll be able to do with your business spotlight today with our audience. So, again, Carlos, thank you so much for joining us today. We certainly appreciate it. It's been my pleasure to talk with you and learn a little bit more about you and your business.
Thanks for the opportunity, Christy. I enjoyed it.
All right, Carlos, thanks so much.
All right. Bye bye.